Alright, let's knock out Chapter 9, Schools and Delinquency. As you can imagine, schools, our children spend a lot of time at school. Well, not right now they don't because we are in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, but during normal times, children would typically spend a lot of time at school. What do you think are some major issues in American schools? And I know this is going to talk about them over time, but just thinking about it right now, what kind of issues do we have? Are our schools funded equally? Are there issues with drugs, gangs, violence, bullying, crappy teachers, you name it? There's all kinds of issues that we currently have in the United States, but in 1918, that's when we as Americans were required to attend school. If you're under 18 and you have not graduated from high school, then you're required to attend some sort of school program. Blah, 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 free education. During the 19th century, schools were chaotic and violent, and as you can imagine, there are some schools now that are still chaotic and violent. History of education. Yeah, there was. This all fits right in with what we're dealing with in society right now, but racial segregation of schools was constitutional until 1954. Kind of hard for me. I was not alive during the 50s. I can't even imagine a time when this was true, but it obviously was. And then we look at the racial tensions and issues that are alive and well, unfortunately, in our society today. It goes all the way back. Education. Okay. So, vandalism, violence, and bullying. Vandalism, any kind of destroying any kind of property at school. You know, this happens all the time. When I was in high school, we had lockers on the outside, like regular lockers to put our books and stuff in, not like a PE locker, but like regular lockers. And we had to stop using them because people kept lighting them on fire. That'd be an example of vandalism. I think most schools now, I know Hoover had, when I was working there, they had some lockers, but they were all sealed off, and I think ultimately they finally removed them. Does violence happen at school? Yes. Having been a probation officer at a high school for 5 years, yes, rape, fighting, attacks, gang warfare, you name it, it happens on school grounds. So, obviously, we have issues to address. How can you focus on learning when sometimes, depending on where you are and who you are, you're trying to figure out how you're going to stay alive through the end of the day? And so, obviously, it can become an issue. What can we do now to make schools safer? And I'm going to throw out some answers that I think some of you would probably say. Get metal detectors. Parents freak out for whatever reason. I think a lot of schools have considered this, but the parents don't want their children to have to be subjected to metal detectors. Have a police officer on campus. Most of them do. Have a probation officer on campus. Most of them do. How can we make them safer? I don't know the answer to this. You guys are our future. Figure it out. Bullying. I love this. How mean. Bullying. Does it happen? It happens every day. Has it happened for the history of the world? Yes, it has. It happened when I was in elementary school. It happened when you were in elementary school. It's happening today. And it's awful. I think a lot of people have used the term bullying for things that aren't necessarily bullying, but typically it's when a stronger person intimidates a weaker person to gain their compliance by either physically hurting them or making them scared. You probably went through these bully awareness programs where you had, what did they call them? Rallies, like anti-bullying rallies. When I worked at Hoover, I know they had the anti-bullying rallies. And it's kind of like the say no to drugs thing. I think when kids are young, everybody kind of goes along with it. And then once you get into junior high, high school, things kind of change. But 1 in 7 students in grades, kindergarten through 12th, is either a bully or has been bullied. Cyberbullying. This has come to a whole other level. And again, I think I mentioned in one of the last chapters that I didn't grow up with the internet. So this is all kind of for me. I wouldn't say it's new, but watching my children, my 19 and 17-year-olds go through junior high and high school and dealing with the internet issues, let's say. I'm not going to say that cyberbullying was a particular issue for either one of them, but can you imagine how easily that could happen? Are you much less likely to say something to someone's face than you are to say it online? And the answer, by the way, is yes. A lot of people will say all kinds of horrible things over the internet that they would never say in person. And people, young people, adults even, have come to the point of committing suicide as a result of cyberbullying. They become so hopeless that their life is ever going to be any better that they end up committing suicide. So this one, a pretty significant problem, and it's pretty hard to track, too. Let's see, spreading rumors through text or online, sending mean messages, stealing a person's account information. I don't think they have catfishing on here, but stuff like that. Catfishing, posting hurtful or threatening messages, pretending to be someone else online, sexting. Good Lord, don't ever take a picture of yourself and leave it on your cell phone. I'm just saying, don't take some nude picture of yourself. You're just asking for trouble. And taking unflattering pictures and sending them to others. How is delinquency linked to school failure? Again, think about being a horrible student. You go to school and every day you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't understand. I don't feel like I have the help. I don't feel like I have the support. I am not going to be good at school, at my education. So maybe I could be good at something else. Like being the school drug dealer, like being the school tough guy that beats everybody else up, like being the girl who sleeps with everybody, that kind of stuff. So delinquency is linked with school failure, because if you're doing really well in school and you are getting some, self-esteem from your school performance, you're much less likely to be a delinquent. Blah, 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 blah. Low social status. Most delinquents want to succeed in school. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, school status. Negative effect towards school involvement in anti-school subgroup and deviant behavior. Some of you have known people like this before that would make fun of you if you got good grades. Because you were square, or you were the nerd, smarty pants, whatever, the bookworm, all that kind of stuff. That does happen. So all this stuff totally makes sense. School has a role in school. The school does have a role in school failure, though. I totally believe that. Okay, I'm gonna kind of skip through that. Students' rights in school. This is interesting to me. I was just having a discussion about this yesterday with my mother-in-law and my kids about the fact that, did you know that corporal punishment, meaning spanking, is legal in, I think they said 17 states in America? It is legal to spank a student at school in 17 states in America. Is that crazy or what? Anyways, I was shocked by that. California is not one of them. But if you can imagine, I remember being a kid and I worked in the office. I helped out in the office doing something, I don't know, bringing in attendance or whatever. And so I would walk into the office of my school in Selma, my elementary school, and I remember Mr. Pell was the principal, and on the wall in Mr. Pell's office was a paddle. And students could get paddled. And I'm old, but I'm not that old. This was crazy. But anyway, students have rights in schools. There's my corporal punishment rant for the day. When a child is at school, the school is responsible for that child. So they're responsible for that child as if that was their own child. Children do have due process rights in school when they are disciplined in school. They do have rights to due process. They have the right to have a person higher up look at the ruling that was made. Searches at schools, really interesting. A lot of you probably have wondered this before. Maybe you haven't. If you went to Fresno Unified Schools, and I think Clovis does the same thing, they hired an outside agency to have drug dogs. So the drug dog would basically they would have you, all of you, leave your classroom, but leave your backpacks or whatever else in the classroom. The dog would go around. If he alerted on your bag, you were going to get searched. That's totally legal in schools. And the reason being is because there's so much more at risk in a school setting. If there's violence in a school setting, you know, hundreds of children could lose their lives. So it's a little different than out in the real world. Judicial intervention in schools during the past 3 decades had positive and negative impacts. Fresno Unified is really having a tough time with some of this stuff right now, or at least they were when I was there. Hopefully you'll remember the article I had you read about McLean High School and restorative justice. Well, something that I saw happen in the schools was that when a school suspended too many students, that principal would be questioned and be directed to reduce the number of suspensions. Does that make sense? So typically, if a person gets suspended from school, they've done something. You know, for us, a lot of it was either fighting, drug use, stuff like that. So basically, the principals were being told, figure it out and deal with those students on campus. Don't send them home. Don't suspend them. You have to keep them on campus. What happens when a juvenile, is not on campus during school hours? Guess what? The school loses money. They don't get paid by the government for that child. So every time a student is suspended off campus, they lose money. So they've been basically trying to figure out other options to deal with discipline issues, restorative justice being one of them. So anyways, violence and delinquency in the schools continues to be a problem. We know that. We all know that. School resource officer. We have these. My partner was Officer Underwood at Hoover High School. He and I shared an office on the campus, so we were both there, you know, Monday through Friday most of the time. He was there more than I was because I actually had to go back to juvenile hall and do work in my office there too. But anyways, they're there for a lot of reasons: investigating incidents, identifying suspects, controlling campus access, searching for drugs and weapons. But they're also there to, number one, build relationships with students. And number 2, hopefully make students think twice before committing delinquent behavior. And I used to see this. If I wasn't there, the students knew because my car wasn't parked out front. And my probation kids would act a fool because they knew I wasn't there. And if they saw that Officer Underwood's car wasn't there, you can best bet there was going to be a fight. If it was there, typically, you know, not always, sometimes it didn't matter, but a lot more times there was less chance of a fight, which is, you know, interesting. But school discipline, security measures, corporal punishment, we already talked about that, room detention, out of school suspensions, and expulsion from school. So these are some of the things that are used for discipline. What is a dropout? A dropout is a person who is of school age in California, meaning under 18, who simply does not attend school anymore just because they don't want to. I remember growing up in Selma, we probably started in my graduating class with like 400 students, and we ended up with about 200. That many dropped out, which was really sad. 1 in 5 dropping out. I'm sorry, in the United States, 1 in 5 drops out prior to graduation. Really sad. Reasons for dropping out, there's all kinds of stuff. It's really sad. Academic failure, disinterest in school, problematic behaviors that interfere with learning and life events. In Selma, back in my day, one of the things was pregnancy. We had a lot of young ladies that got pregnant. So we actually had a daycare on campus when I was in high school, so that life event did not result in someone dropping out of school. School intervention programs, good teaching, having teachers who care and who really, really have the students' best interest at heart, I think is probably one of the most important things. And you guys, I'm going to guess, are probably going to agree with that. Individualized education achievements should be defined by individual progress. So some people are never going to get a 4.0. But let's say they got their best grade point average ever this semester, then let's give them a little pat on the back, you know? Tracking systems should be avoided. You know that they do all this standardized testing to track. Schools should adopt more flexible hours. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen. Actually, I think that is going to happen. I think Fresno schools will be changing to later hours soon. These are all ways to improve public schools, alternative schools, mentoring relationships, improved school experience, public school communities, relationships, school-based anti-violence programs. And yeah, and that's it.